Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. Elusive, the best word to describe the wide receiver position through the first 8 weeks of the NFL season. In this video, I will identify the wide receivers I am targeting by utilizing the best fantasy relevant information. Before I share my research and strategy for the wide receivers in Week 9, I want to take a quick look back at Week 8. The top 5 projected wide receivers in Week 8 were as follows: Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, Julio Jones, and Godwin from Tampa Bay. The actual top 5 scoring wide receivers were as follows: Michael Evans from Tampa Bay, 45.80 points. Cooper Kupp, 38 points. Kenny Golladay, 32.30 points. Michael Thomas, 30.30 points. And Julio Jones, 28.20 points. These wide receivers combined for 174.60 fantasy points. They did this on 53 targets and 45 receptions. This comes out to 3.29 fantasy points per target. Now let's take a look at these numbers through the first 8 weeks and how they can be used to identify the best wide receivers to target in Week 9. I've developed this chart in the last few days. It utilizes the categories that I'm interested in. I'm doing it for each position, and for the wide receivers, if you follow along right here, you'll see obviously salary, targets per game, fantasy points scored per game, opponents' fantasy points allowed per game to that position, red zone targets, average depth of target, points per snap, this week's opponent, which will be based on what the how much the opponent allows to that position, the current line, and the over and under for that game. Taking all these numbers into consideration, these are the wide receivers that I'm going to be targeting in Week 9. If you'd like, just follow along with the chart, and then we'll sum it up when we get to the end of it. Number 1, Kenny Golladay. He's 7,700. He's averaging 18 fantasy, as you see here, he's averaging 18 fantasy points per game. Oakland is giving up 42 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. He's received 9 red zone targets. He has an average depth of target of 15.4 yards, which on here, if you look, it is actually the third highest on the slate. It's the second highest total of the on the slate at 50.5 points. They are a small road underdog at 2.5 points. I like Kenny Golladay. I'm not real happy, enthusiastic about the $7,700 salary because of what it takes to pay that off, and with the different targets that Matt Stafford has in Marvin Jones and Danny Amendola, and we'll be talking about them here shortly. And Galladay's coming off a really big week. I do like the game script of this game. I feel like there's going to be some points on the board. This could potentially be the highest scoring game of the week, and I have a lot of interest in Galladay if I can get up there to that 7,700. I'll be watching ownership, and I'll be addressing that tomorrow when I do my lineup building and game by game breakdown. We'll take a look at the ownership. I can tell you right now, I just looked at some ownerships on a site that I use, and Galladay is actually at the top in ownership. But I'm definitely going to have him in the player pool. Next is Tyler Lockett from Seattle. 7,500. He's in the game that has the highest total on the board at 53 points. He's scoring 17.1 fantasy points per game. Tampa Bay's giving up 43.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. He's had 9 red zone targets. I believe Tampa Bay will be able to score, and Seattle will have to go to the air to move the ball against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's coming in, I believe, number 2 against the run. very stingy, and I believe that the Seattle passing game is going to be the correct pivot off of Chris Carson this week. He's priced up there, pretty high, but he is when he's getting an average close to 7 targets per game, 6.75. He's had a couple really big games where he was targeted a lot by Wilson. His points per snap isn't that great, 2.256. And average depth of target is just average, but I believe this game has potential to be a shootout as well. I'm always interested in the players that are in the games with the highest totals. Um, that's not where I stop my research. It's where I start. But I definitely have a lot of interest in Tyler Lockett this week. He's a couple $100 less than Kenny Galladay. Next is Chris Godwin from Tampa Bay. He's $7,300. I like Godwin this week more than I like Evans. Seems like they've been alternating weeks. Last week, Evans went off, had a pretty big game. And this game, Seattle gave up 409, I believe it was 490 yards passing to Atlanta and their backup quarterback last week, Matt Schaub. The game script was fitting for Atlanta to have to put the ball in the air in comeback mode, but the game ended up being a lot closer than you would think. The final score was 27-20. But Godwin's receiving, as you follow this across here, he's 9 targets per game. He's scoring on this slate. He's actually scoring the most fantasy points per game, 23.9 fantasy points per game. He's scoring 0.345 fantasy points per snap. And remember, that's just being on the field. That's he's on the field. That's not receptions or targets or anything, but that's everything relevant, and that's pretty high. I mean, the highest on this slate is right above Tyreek Hill at 405, but that's pretty good. And as I mentioned, he's in the highest total game of the week. I do believe that Tampa Bay is going to be able to move the ball through the air in this game. This isn't the Seattle defense of old, and I'll definitely have my share of some of the Tampa Bay passing game in this game. He definitely sets up to use in game stacks for this particular game. Next, right under Chris Godwin is Mike Evans. He's $100 less. He's receiving 9.57 targets per game, averaging 21.2 fantasy points per game. He's had 12 red zone targets, which is the most on this slate for any wide receiver. He has really high average depth of target of 15.1 yards, 0.322 fantasy points per snap, and obviously he's in the highest. He's in the game with the highest total as well. But I just have a feeling this week that it's going to go back to it, and it really has. If you look back, it's been alternating weeks. That doesn't mean that Evans can't go off this week too. It doesn't mean that both of them can't go off. And I believe that they are going to be able to put some points on Seattle through the air. And this game sets up to be a shootout through the air because Tampa Bay's defense is very stingy against the run. Next up, Davante Adams. And I'm sorry it's not showing up this time on the other videos I've done, my quarterback and my running back. I had the players that I was going to be targeting highlighted over here. So if you just follow along, and I'm going to recap this as well. And I haven't figured out how to put this down below so you can follow a link to it or what have you. I'm going to try to put it on my Twitter account. If you see below me, it's talking about rotating my Twitter. Follow me at winning about instead of about winning. And hopefully you'll be able to see this there too, or just take a screenshot and use it how you'd like. But next up is Davante Adams, $7,100. He still hasn't been cleared to play. Last I seen, he still had a questionable tag, but he was trending upwards. He practiced more this week, and I have a feeling he's going to be on the field in this game. When he was the games he did play, he was receiving 9.25 targets per game, scoring 17.2 fantasy points per game. He's in the third highest game total on this slate at 48.5 points. Small road favorite, 3.5 at LA. Aaron Rodgers has been on fire, and this could definitely make the numbers for Aaron Rodgers go up. I mean, he's been on fire with a really makeshift receiving corps, and it's just you can just imagine when he might be able to get done with Davante Adams back. This is another game that I feel like is going to have some points involved in. I believe the Chargers and Philip Rivers will be able to put some points on the board against Green Bay, and I believe they'll have to do it through the air. And as a road favorite, they're basically saying that Chargers are going to be in comeback mode, but to get there, I believe that the Green Bay passing game is going to be a big part of this game. Definitely like Davante Adams coming back this week. He might be a nice pivot off of the higher owned Galladay and Lockett. He might also be contrarian because since it is his first game back, a lot of people might be hesitant to put him in their lineups and take that wait and see mentality. After Adams is Allen Robinson. He's $6,800. This is actually one of my favorites this week. I said in my quarterback video that I, for some reason, have this really strong feeling about Trubisky this week. I feel like he's going to be under-owned. The Philly pass defense is horrible at best, and Trubisky loves to target Allen Robinson. He's getting 9.42 targets per game, scoring 17.1 fantasy points per game. Philadelphia right here on this slate are giving up the most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position and 45.1 fantasy points per game. He's received 9 red zone targets. Small road underdog, 41.5 points. I'm not real crazy about that total, 41. That's kind of scary. This is a game that I would lean towards the over because I just feel like Chicago is this game could surprise some people as far as the scoring. Both teams are pretty stingy against the run, and I see Chicago Trubisky targeting Robinson a lot. Next up, another favorite this week of mine, Keenan Allen, 6,400. It's really strange to see him at that price when you look at some of the other wide receivers in front of him. He's actually receiving the most targets per game on this slate. He's receiving 10 targets per game. He's scoring 17.1 fantasy points per game, 48.5 point game total. One of Philip Rivers' favorite targets, obviously, with the thought that Green Bay being a favorite. This game script sets up for the Chargers to be in comeback mode and throwing the ball around. And now that Green Bay is only giving up 32.9 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, but you have to take into account who have they played. And Keenan Allen is definitely a big part of this offense. I believe that they might have a more concerted effort to get him the ball this week. And I really love that price of 6,400. Towards the end of last year, he was you would never see Keenan Allen at that price, and and volume alone, I believe he'll be able to pay off that 6,400. Really nice value with him right there. After Keenan Allen, Marvin Jones Jr. He's 6,000. Nice pivot off of Kenny Galladay a couple weeks ago. He had a really huge game. He's getting 6.71, almost 7 targets per game. Oakland's given up 42 points per game to the wide receiver position. He's received 9 red zone targets, same amount as Kenny Galladay. Average depth of target of 13.2 yards, and game total 50.5. And another thing with Detroit, remember they were supposed to have been using Ty Johnson last week as the running back to replace Kerryon Johnson. Ended up being Trey Carson, who I believe had 12 carries for 34 yards. So, and Stafford's averaging, I believe, close to 38 pass attempts per game. 37 pass attempts per game. He's actually one of my favorite quarterbacks this week. So, and they're not going to get it done on the ground, and it's not out of reach to see Stafford put the ball in the air 45 times this week. I believe this game, and Vegas believes it's going to be higher scoring too, with a 50.5 point game total. So definitely like Marvin Jones. Wouldn't even be afraid to stack him up with Galladay in a couple of lineups. But for that to happen, you definitely need to have Oakland doing their share of scoring as well. This game, as I mentioned with Galladay, I really believe that this game could actually be the highest scoring game on the slate this week. So I have a lot of interest in Marvin Jones and definitely like that 6,000 salary. Right underneath Marvin Jones is another receiver in the game for the other team, Tyrell Williams. He's 5,900. He was out for a few games. He's receiving 5 targets per game. Darren Waller, the tight end, is getting a lot of attention from Carr, but Detroit's given up 38.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. He has an average ADOT of 15.6, which is the second highest on the slate. 50.5 point game total, a 2.5 point home favorite. And now Detroit doesn't do well against the run game, and that might cause you to lessen your expectations for the Oakland passing game. Detroit's actually, I believe, they're like 31st against the rush, so this could set up for a really good game for Josh Jacobs, which, as I said, could definitely hinder the passing game. But if Detroit somehow can get out front of Oakland, then Oakland likes to bring in Richard passing situations or in comeback mode, and then that's the game script where you could see the Tyrell Williams and Waller, the tight end, getting peppered with targets. After Williams, I'm going to drop down like DK Metcalf from Seattle. He's $5,700. He's receiving 5.63 targets per game. And Tampa Bay is giving up 43.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. He's received 11 red zone targets, which is second on this slate, behind Mike Evans with 12. Average depth of target, 13.8 yards. Highest game total on the board. This is a wide receiver that you could use as part of a stack or a pivot off of some of the other ones up top. Pivot off of Lockett or part, as I mentioned, a part of a stack with Lockett and some pieces from Tampa Bay as well. but definitely have interest in Metcalf at that price of 5,700. Doesn't take much to pay, get value for that. After Metcalf, drop down Danny Amendola. He's 4,700. He's received 19 receptions in the last 2 weeks. 2 games. One game he had over 100 yards. The other game he come up just short of 100 for 95 yards. And in the game last week, it started out. In the first quarter, he just got peppered with a lot of targets from Stafford, and Stafford likes going to him. He's receiving 6.5 targets per game. Oakland is giving up again 42 points to the wide receiver position. He's averaging 0.338 fantasy points per snap, and second highest total on the board. And Amendola is another one like Metcalf, where you could use him as part of a game stack, team stack, and use him that way. Maybe in the flex position at 47, but he definitely on DraftKings and PPR, those receptions add up quick when you're getting 1 point per reception. Next, Mike Williams, kind of the same situation as Amendola and Metcalf. Mike is 4,600. He's receiving 7.14 targets per game, which is really good. He's had 10 red zone targets, which is third highest on this slate. He's third on this slate at 15.4 ADOT. Third highest total on the board. Another target for Rivers in a game that I believe against Aaron Rodgers definitely sets up to have some points. He's another one you could use in a game stack, team stack, 4,600, plug him into a flex spot. But definitely interested in Mike Williams. He's a nice big target for Philip Rivers when they get close. And well, you can see he's received 10 red zone targets. So definitely have interest in Mike Williams at $4,600. Summing up my wide receivers, I will be targeting the following again in week 9. Kenny Galladay, Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, Michael Evans, Tyrell Williams, DK Metcalf, Danny Amendola, and Mike Williams. Just want to go over this chart with you again. This row here obviously is the salary. Red doesn't mean these receivers are bad. These reds are obviously the areas where you're going to have to pay up. Yellow is obviously middle of the road, a lot better. You see Keenan Allen in there, 6,400. That should obviously, to me, be green. And then down here, the lower salary. That doesn't mean they're the best receivers. That just means their salaries are the best, as far as trying to get value. The second column is targets that these receivers receive per game. The third column is fantasy points per game scored, the receiver scores, and then right next to it is what their opponent gives up to that position, to the wide receiver. So let's say in this case, Adam Thielen, he's scoring 15.9 fantasy points per game, and they're playing Kansas City, who is giving up 29.4 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Next one is red zone targets. Touchdowns have so much variance from week to week and are so hard to predict. But an edge that you can get is by identifying the guys that are getting targets or are getting the touches when these teams do get down in the red zone. Average depth of target. This is completed and non-completed. Next week, I'm probably going to add total air yards, which will be a culmination of shows you the air yards ran, whether the pass was completed or not. And this is just the average of those routes. And obviously, Galladay at 15.4, Diggs leads the way at 15.8, and Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans The next column is points per snap. Excuse me, just being on the field. Best one on this slate is Tyreek Hill at 0.405. That doesn't have anything to do with receptions or targets or anything. This is just all things relevant when this player is on the field. Next column is this week's opponent, and this week's opponent should match. The colors should match what that opponent gives up to the wide receiver position. Like in this case, Kansas City is red, which means it's not a great matchup for Thielen passing wise, because they only give up 29.4. In comparison, you drop down here to Metcalf for Seattle. Tampa Bay is giving up 43.8 fantasy points per game to the wide receiver, and then you jump over and Tampa Bay. It just is a good matchup. This over here is the line. Minus obviously is the favorite. All the greens are the favorites. The reds are the underdogs, and the yellow is the one game on here that's a pick. And then the over-unders are the top. This week I used the top 3 games in green, and then there really wasn't. It pretty much drops off from 48.5 and then drops right down to 42.5. So there's a really big difference there in the games this week. So again, screenshot this, use it the best way that the way that you would like. If you guys would drop any comments or opinions below, let me know what you like or don't like about this chart, or anything else that you want to comment on. Please feel free to drop those comments below. I want to thank you for joining me. Special thanks to my subscribers who are hanging in there with me as I build this channel. I'm slowly trending upwards in the subscription area. Just gained another one today. It's slow, but it is growing and trending in the right way, and I appreciate you guys subscribing and following my videos. I hope this information provides you some value, and if you would share this video, like it, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. That really helps me out. And I will be posting tight end defensive special team combined video after this one. And then I will be doing lineup building and game by game breakdown tomorrow. So don't miss that video as well. You can also follow me on Twitter. As I mentioned, it's been scrolling below me at winning about. Didn't get to pick the name when I picked my Twitter, so you can follow me on Twitter as well. So I'll be returning shortly, as I said, with the tight end defensive special teams. And my name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports, and I'll see you guys real soon.